Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today's video is the ASUS ROG Strix Scar 15. I know that's a mouthful. This is ASUS's premium notebook. We'll see how this competes with others in its class, but more importantly, let's see how the thermals and performance is in this notebook. Let's watch to find out. Let's roll. So of course, I've had this unit for a better part of a week now, and this is an impressive unit. It comes in around $3,000 Canadian, and I can say, you know, the differences on the G15 is subtle. First thing you'll notice is that the ROG logo lights up, has the RGB behind it, and then when you look at the deck itself, the deck is actually pretty smooth. So on the G15, you have that faux kind of brushed plastic. This is all smooth. It's actually fairly fingerprint resistant, which is really nice. The RGB though, on the deck itself, all of the secondary icons are not backlit or not backlit very well from the RGB. So that's unfortunate. When you're in a dark space, you're gonna have to kind of, look around for it. But, that's effectively it. Of course, you got this nice RGB strip around the front. And the other feature is the Keystone 2, which I'll talk about a little bit later. All right, so let's talk about the specs on this unit. So this unit features a beefy i9-10980HK. That's 8 cores, 16 threads, boosting up to 5.3 gigahertz. Memory is only 16 gigs, but at 3200 in dual channel. Also features a 1 terabyte SSD NVMe. And of course, we have a 66 watt hour battery, one of the smallest in its class. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And in terms of graphics, RTX 2070 Super Max P, so 115 watts. And the screen on this is a 300 hertz display, 1080p, 100 or just up to 100% of the sRGB, and a 3 millisecond response time. This is a great screen. Now, the nice thing about this is it actually is able to turn off the 300 hertz and go down to 60 hertz when you're on battery only. So that gets you a little bit more battery life, which is nice. In terms of upgradability, looking under the hood, you can see that the unit itself is fairly upgradable. Of course, we can swap out the memory if you choose. You can also change out your wireless chip, and you can also add 2 additional SSDs in this configuration. So you can have 3 total. But overall, everything's easy to access, which is very nice. Just one thing to note, when you do take off that bottom cover, just be aware of the ribbon for the RGB that goes around the bottom strip of the unit. All of this in, how much does this weigh? 5.7 pounds. So that's not too bad, but I definitely have lighter that's out there and in its class. So this is actually one of the heavier ones, even with all this premium material. But the one thing I do like about this is that you do have a nice handhold on the back, even though it is quite a little bit heavier than I'd be, I'd like. You are able to kind of move it around, maneuver it fairly easily. Your arm will get tired, so just be aware of that. That extra pound does make a difference. All right, so let's talk about some thermals on this. So during gaming, I did find that the deck got warm, but not overly hot. There's definitely a couple hot spots near the top of the deck itself, but I saw it in around about 40 degrees Celsius, which is pretty acceptable. On the touchpad itself, so it is a precision touchpad. It does have this numpad that comes in, so you can see that there. I ended up feeling that I end up hitting that by mistake though when I am moving around, say in a web browser or whatnot. So I actually found it kind of annoying. And then because it's on your touchpad, and if you don't have a mouse hooked up to it, you can put in, of course, your touch your numbers, but being able to move around, of course, you have to disengage the numlock. So I just found that kind of clunky overall, which was, you know, just more annoying. I'm sure I could get used to it over time, but why? Why? I do like the keyboard though. So in terms of the keyboard, I did find that typing on this, great tactile feel. Asus makes one of the better keyboards in the gaming notebook space. I do like that there is not a numpad on the side because it doesn't cram the keys all together, and that way you actually get your touchpad more in the center of the notebook, which I like. It's not pushed off to the side like the Legion 7i was. I did talk about the I/O in the last video, in my unboxing and first impressions video. However, the one thing I would say is I wish that it did have Thunderbolt 3. It's not on here, unfortunately. You do get a USB-C out the back. It is display capable, and you can also do charging off of that unit. So let's talk about this little device here. It's the Keystone 2. So in the G15 and the G models, this is actually just a blank. It's like a faux marking of it. In the SCAR model, it actually has it, and it's you can take it out. And so you can see that right here, it fits. It has a small magnet in it. And so once you put it inside, makes the keyboard light up like that. It will, depending on your settings, it will launch your game library, and away you go. So why have that? That is actually a mystery. To me, I just felt, okay, great. It is a physical keystone that you put into your device that launches effectively Armoury Crate. You do have a button on your keyboard for it right here. So to me, kind of redundant and a little clunky. But that's not all it can do. You can also do other things with the keystone. So when you enter it in, it could say, turn up your fan to full blast. It could remember some of your account settings and restore your profile configurations. However, it will only work in SCAR models. So when you remove the keystone, it can be configured to go into stealth mode. So it hides all your windows, turns off the audio. I don't know what you're going to use that for, but I guess if you want to make a quick getaway and leave your laptop behind and have your machine turn everything off, I don't know, that seems strange. It can also lock your Windows account. I think that is beneficial, but again, because this is just a keystone, I don't think you're pulling it out every time. It also has something called Shadow Drive. It basically can partition a small amount of the remaining free space of your hard drive off. It could be its own encryption, and so you can put some files in there. It does use your existing hard drive though. So again, I just feel like it's gimmicky. Like, to be honest, I wish instead of the keystone, maybe they did something else in the laptop instead. So maybe some people would like it, but to me, just a gimmick. So how does the unit sound for audio? Well, it does have two bottom firing speakers on either side. They are 2-watt speakers. Let's give them a listen and see how they fare. So overall, they're okay. I find that they're just, of course, they don't have the depth to them as you kind of expect, but you know, they can do the trick. Of course, this notebook also doesn't have a webcam at all on this, so which is, I think, an oversight for all the 2020 models from Asus this year. Of course, with many people trying to do a lot of video conferencing, but of course you can plug it in, run one off the top. It just would be nice to have something embedded into the notebook itself. So let's talk a little bit about the sound levels. So sound levels in this are pretty loud for a premium notebook. So in turbo mode, it gets up to 63 decibels. 63 decibels is harsh on the ears. I found that it would be very difficult to game at that level. Yeah, you could put the headphones on, but I think you'd still be able to hear that, the whirring, the whooshing of the fans. In performance mode itself, I did see that it was doing about 57 decibels, so you get about a 5 decibel increase. Now, ASUS claims that they put liquid metal on the CPU and the GPU to keep it cooler. It's supposed to get up at another 10 to 12 degrees lower. That's kind of shocking to me because I actually was having thermal locks on this where it was hitting the top of the thermal limits of the CPU. GPU was still okay, low 80s, but the reality is that I felt like it was high, the fans were high, so it was loud and hot. I don't know what else to say about that, other than I didn't like it. All right, so let's get into the benchmarks. PC Mark 10, this unit hit 5771, kind of right in the middle, getting actually beaten by the 10750H in some cases, so not much to write home around on this one. Moving over to Cinebench R20. So this is where I did some undervolting on this unit, and you can see the difference. It's a massive impact on the Cinebench score. In silent mode, sitting around 3000, performance around 3800, and then in fact, when you went into turbo mode, it actually was slightly lower. But with undervolting, this shot up to the highest score I've ever recorded at 4550. So that's really impressive. That even beat out the M15R3 Alienware by almost 150 points. Now, let's talk about the temps though. So when we come and look at the temperatures on this, to get to that score, even undervolted, it hit 95 Celsius. And that's kind of across the board. Even in the performance mode at 4322, again, 95 Celsius. The undervolting helped get more performance because it go all the way up to the top. And what you would see in the other ones, say turbo, is as it would go, it would hit its thermal lock, stay there for a little bit, and then declock, basically push that limit down. So that's why you'd see 87 in the turbo mode. And then of course that drives down the score because it's now taking down your frequency. This graph does really show it hitting its thermal limits all the way through. Now moving over to 3D Mark. So this hit 8714 in Time Spy and 10451 in Firestrike Extreme. Now Call of Duty Modern Warfare, so this is the Fog of War, max settings, we saw this come in at 77 frames a second. This is actually one of the slowest scores I've seen, you know, within a couple frames, but still in that high kind of mid 70 range. Moving over to Shadow of a Tomb Raider. So 1080p highest settings. On performance mode, hit around 95 frames a second, and in turbo 102. Now looking at the temps and the sound levels in this one. So you can see around 57 decibels on the performance profile, turbo at 62, and then you can see the corresponding frames per second. I did include the Alienware, that's the light gray bar. You can see that not only was it able to get all the way up to 100 frames per second, but it was down at 46 decibels. How low those temperatures are relative to the performance that you're getting. You know, I really have to hand it to Alienware on this one. Now, heading over to Red Dead Redemption to all ultra settings. Performance mode, 53 frames per second. Turbo mode, 55 frames per second. So kind of right there in the middle of the pack. Heading over to the temps for Red Dead Redemption, you can see again temps, you know, CPU on turbo all the way up at 95 Celsius. And then of course in the performance mode, 86 Celsius on the CPU. GPU staying a steady 81 in either scenario. Heading over to Anno 1800, this posted the highest score at 120 frames per second through the benchmark. Moving over to Metro Exodus, about 35 frames on extreme, 63 in the ultra settings. And this was just below the 2080s. So the 2070, this was posting a pretty decent score just outside of the Alienware. The Alienware 2070 Super is like, you know, it crushed it. I think it has so much legs there. And with the overclock, that certainly helped in this case. Now heading over to Death Stranding. So max settings, DLSS on quality, and 95 frames per second. Of course, Forza Horizon 4 ultra settings posted a score of 126 frames per second. And then heading over to Flight Simulator ultra settings. So in performance mode, this hit just shy of 38 frames per second, and in turbo mode, 40 frames per second. So this was actually one of the lower scores overall compared to the rest in the bunch. Heading over to Fortnite. So of course the new update came out. So I did include both of these. The blue bar is all epic, and then the new orange bar is actually epic with DLSS at quality. So I will start to build out that, but you can see it actually gained another 16, 17 frames per second, which is very impressive. Now kind of competing way up at that top end, even with the 2080s up there. So I'll be excited to see how this fares over some time. Moving over to Apex Legends, max settings posted 146 frames per second. All right, so that's it for the benchmarks. It's kind of a mixed result. You know, I think the CPU in this is just too heavy for the thermals. The reality, you know, if you're gonna get the SCAR model, I think you have to go just a little bit lower, maybe a 10750H, because it's hitting that 95 degrees, even with an undervolt. Like, that's just too much. It's too much processor for this, this chassis to handle. So battery life in this unit came in just around 3 to 4.5 hours. So not great. I did have some issues with this unit though. When it was on battery, or even when it's plugged in and idle, it would randomly restart. And so I don't know why. I went through, we updated the BIOS, we did all the drivers on this unit, and it still is just randomly rebooting. Now, it doesn't reboot when you're playing games, but when you're just sitting at the desktop, for some reason, it will just decide that it has no more, proactively reboots, and away you go. I ripped this thing all the way apart. ASUS said, let's do a full wipe on the system. So, you know, I just probably got a bad unit out of the bunch. Now, in terms of the screen, so the screen, 300 hertz, 3 millisecond. This thing is gorgeous, super smooth, like moving windows around. It just looks gorgeous. Now, the one thing I have to say about this is screen bleed. So this is actually a fairly decent panel. There is a little bit of light bleed coming in the left-hand corner on this model. Of course, that may vary depending on the model that you get. So not perfect, but pretty good. Isn't enough where you're like, hey, I'm always looking at it. It's just slight, and you really only notice it in kind of dark spaces. So good from that perspective. So overall, kind of thoughts on this unit? Well, I'm disappointed, to be honest. You know, this unit, while it's got a very premium feel to it, you know, it's got this aluminum lid to it, but then it has all this plastic. And so while it's smooth and it's fairly fingerprint resistant, it's got some etching in here, which is nice. All plastic on the bottom. You know, for one of the more expensive notebooks from ASUS, and just based on the thermal performance and the fact that there's liquid metal on this and it's still not able to keep its thermals in check along with the noise, it's not very good from that perspective. In terms of an IMO score, you know, I'm gonna give this a 6.5 out of 10. You know, overall, you know, besides the rebooting, I think that's just a one-off case. You know, I just think for $3,000, you know, I would go with an Alienware. I think you're going to get a better spec. You'll get better performance. You'll get better thermals, cooler unit, far quieter. So to me, I'd say I'd just stay clear. Like, to be honest, there's not much about this unit where I'm like, hey, it's that much more premium. No, it's still plastic. So to me, it's not worth the premium over the G15. I think the G15 actually offers more value for the money, and arguably that will give you you know, a better experience. And in some cases, you know, throwing a 2070 Super into that with a couple that with a 10750H, I think that's going to be kind of a sweet spot for budget. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. That wraps up the ASUS ROG Strix Scar 15. I hope you found the video beneficial, and I hope that helps with your buying decision out there. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll post a link to this notebook in the description down below. That's it for me. Bye for now.